Welcome into Rover Sports Midnight Edition. We're right here in the Philly bunker, and we're very motivated to do a show tonight on The Last Dance, documentary of none other than Michael Jordan. I know many of you watch this. We're here on Bruce Grossinger Facebook, on Twitter and Periscope. We welcome your comments. We welcome your shares. I am wearing a red shirt in honor of the Chicago Bulls.
Yep. Michael Jordan.
A lot of thoughts to unpack after the end of this 10-part documentary. And essentially, this was a documentary about the 98 Chicago Bulls, the last dance, the last chance for everybody there. The band was together for the last time. Spencer G., let's start with your thoughts.
I thought that the documentary was tremendous. Every single aspect of it is exactly how I would have portrayed Michael. It's exactly how I would have portrayed the Chicago Bulls. And I just, the way that it ended, him going to Utah and seeing the celebrations of seeing the celebrations in Chicago, what he meant to the city of Chicago, staying with one team throughout the time. I thought it was really, really well done. Even the Steve Kerr part, he said that when his dad passed away before the game, he would think about his father during the national anthem, and then they would cut to the national anthem. So just the shots were very powerful. The last scene with Phil Jackson, when Phil Jackson had that fire and each player put in a piece of paper into that fire. I'm really impressed by the maturity of that Bulls team. Because some people, there's some individuals that might think of that as very hokey, might think of it as corny or primitive, like you're in a third grade class of Native American history. But that Bulls team certainly bought in and they respected Phil Jackson. I also thought the part that was so touching was Michael Jordan and his relationship with his security guard, Gus, and how Gus was promoted throughout. And it just showed you the type of man Michael Jordan is.
Yeah, I think that it really gave us unique access to that Bulls team. And it showed Jordan, it showed the best and worst aspects of him. For some of you, including you, Spencer, who remember the end of his career just because you're young, and for many of the young viewers here, just to be able to see the greatness of Jordan till the end, you saw that there's really, in my opinion, nobody like him. The ability to just win and to will victory. And he had a good supporting cast, but he just would not let anybody around him consider losing. And his speed, his grace, so many highlights of shots, of things you've never seen. Just the way he would go around and spin the ball off the backboard. You probably saw that so many times that you almost take it for granted. The perfect form. The 6'6", perfect size for an NBA player, and just watching all the foes that they faced. And they beat 7 foes that had 70 win seasons. And that was brought out in the last episode. So they played very hard. They played at a time when they didn't have ticky-tack fouls. They didn't have load management. And Michael Jordan got physically beaten up. And this was embodied by the Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys, and the footage was just incredible. So as far as let's talk about some themes. Michael Jordan's toughness, how was it embodied in the series?
In this specific series and episode, he definitely displayed the toughness by going to Utah, and he got food poisoning. And he toughed out the entire game and scored 38 points, and he could have mailed it in. Other instances in that game 6 without Scottie Pippen, everybody else was kind of hurt. Dennis Rodman and everybody on that team was just worn down. And Michael, late in the game, down by 3, Michael has the greatest sequence of his basketball career, one of the greatest sequences in NBA history. And that was just, he just dug so deep to win those games. And even with Reggie Miller, you look at the Pistons series, and he had a high basketball IQ. He made a great pass to Steve Kerr, and Steve had to just gain his respect. And it was pretty amazing how his teammates viewed him. And it wasn't like he was just another guy on the team. I mean, Michael Jordan was almost like an authority figure or a coach that they had to prove their worth to him every single day. And that's pretty amazing, because a lot of times when a rookie gets drafted, a lot of players today will reach out to them and try to get their number and say, welcome to the team. We're going to make you feel comfortable. Welcome in. It's kind of a camaraderie in sports. But with Michael, when you're a rookie, there was no real friendliness. You had to earn the respect of Michael. And that's what was so fascinating about watching Michael.
Yeah, and certainly you could look at certain people like Scott Burrell, very nice guy. He was always his whipping boy.
Yep.
And also Michael Jordan would always find ways to motivate himself, even if he would make up something about a rival. Obviously, the thing with Isaiah Thompson not shake his hands, that really stuck with him, and it made it, even to this day, they still have an ongoing feud. Michael Jordan has not forgiven Isaiah, and Isaiah rationalizes the reason is because when the Boston Celtics lost to the Pistons, he's saying that they walked off. They didn't shake their hands. They were fierce rivals. But you know what? Michael Jordan had a long memory. And everybody, when B.J. Armstrong went to the Orlando Magic, he just, anytime somebody would say something or challenge him at all, he would not forget it, and he would punish them. And he had the ability to punish them, not only on offense. And look at the current day. Guys like James Harden, there's very few. Kawhi Leonard is one of the few people that is offensively dominant and also takes pride in defense. So that last sequence that you pointed out against the Jazz was when Michael Jordan stole the ball from Karl Malone, and that was the sentinel play. They never had to go to a Game 7, and you just don't know. They looked like they were out of gas, and they had to play that seventh game in Utah. So you just don't know if that was the last chance, if that was the final chance. But so exciting to see them win, and also the epilogue that you alluded to, where Jerry Krause obviously had burned his bridges with Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan. It would have been nice, it would have been syrupy for Michael Jordan to say, that was enough, but it wasn't enough for him, because he believes we should have run it back. We should have played another one. And really, when you think about it, it's senseless that they rebuilt that team. And to this day, the team's still rebuilding for the Chicago Bulls. So the fact that Jerry Reinsdorf, who was not portrayed as a villain, but yet when you look at him, he could have said, like he said at the end, he made an offer to Phil Jackson, but it wasn't a wholehearted offer. It was a half-hearted offer. And Michael Jordan said that it would have been difficult for Reinsdorf because Jerry Krause had burned bridges. But watching Scott Van Pelt, who I think is great, do a little epilogue of that. He said that if Jordan would have came back, he would have been able to convince Phil Jackson to come back, and he also would have convinced Scottie Pippen to come back, even on a one-year deal where they obviously insulted Scottie Pippen, being such a great player, given a horrible contract. In Reinsdorf, these days, certainly in the NFL, even in the MLB, if somebody has a drastically low contract, for somebody as important as Scottie Pippen, anybody would restructure it. But Pippen had to go because he had to get a new deal. And at the very end, Steve Kerr was traded and Phil Jackson left. It turns out Michael Jordan retired, later came back, played 2 years, I believe, with Washington. And he came back to some terrible teams, and you just don't really remember those years, because what we remember is the Chicago Bulls and the greatness of the Bulls team, also the characters of the team. Certainly Dennis Rodman. There's been very few guys that could be as crazy as Dennis Rodman and still function. When the lights were on, he was able to function and was one of the best rebounders. But other than that, he was plain crazy. He was a man who danced to a different drummer in the middle of the playoffs to basically disappear and go with Hulk Hogan, and nobody knew about it. And yet he was able to come back, and they showed clips. He had an incredible game when he came back. So He had the ability to just shut it down, turn it off, party, drink, whatever he was doing, and yet come back. And that's very unique. And you just don't see athletes like that who would even be tolerated for a moment. But Dennis Rodman, obviously, is a unique person and an integral part of the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, you touched on Michael, and I think in life it's better to understay than overstay. And it was really interesting to hear Michael say that he really wished he would have played basketball in 1999, I guess it would have been. It was fascinating to hear him say that they could have won 7 championships and that he wanted to still play. But it shows you that Michael, he's only interested in doing something if he has an opportunity to really win a championship or win it in his city. He wasn't going to just take a contract just to continue to play the game of basketball. And it seemed like Michael at its peak, it's very strange actually that he retired from basketball. I would have thought Michael would have looked to go to another team, another franchise, but without Phil Jackson, he just wasn't interested in that, in starting over or going to a new place or a new team, kind of like Tom Brady is doing, kind of like when Charles went to the Phoenix Suns, Joe Montana going to the Kansas City Chiefs. He wasn't interested in doing that. And I think the only reason he came back for the Wizards is because he had part ownership, so that he was getting just an enormous amount of money, and he could have been an NBA owner with the Wizards. That's why he came back. It was like a handshake agreement there. The point that Michael didn't want to play any more basketball when he was in the peak of his career, and he didn't want to go to another destination to play, is it's even hard to describe it because he's such a dominant player. But he just loved Phil. He loved his teammates. He loved the camaraderie. He loved Chicago. So he couldn't imagine playing in another uniform seriously. And I know that people are going to say that he played for Birmingham baseball and he played for the Wizards, but those were 2 minor stops. And when he was with the Wizards, he was totally done. That was just a money grab at the very end. So Michael, it's just the loyalty of the rivalries of basketball, the cities, how they care so much about each city. There's so many players in the NBA now that are traded from city to city. Jimmy Butler goes from Minnesota, then he comes to Philadelphia. D'Angelo Russell plays in New Jersey. Now he's playing in Minnesota. You look at even all-star players in the league. James Harden's getting traded. Paul George gets traded multiple locations. So the city aspect is kind of lost on basketball now. It's a very mobilizing, take 2-year deals and then go to another destination. It's more about the friends. It's more about playing with different people. And in the 90s, it was a very loyal product, kind of like the NFL is. I appreciate the comments. I see Jonathan Walker. Jeff Weigel has been great. I've seen Jeff's comments. We're going to analyze a lot of these comments. Yes.
Karun made some great comments. Again, an Eagles fan, as many of us are here, but one person said Kareem is the greatest of all time. I would challenge that. I believe living in Philadelphia, well, I only saw a little bit of Wilt Chamberlain. I would argue that Wilt Chamberlain, for that position was the most dominant ever. That Kareem was an incredible player, but Wilt Chamberlain was a track and field star. Wilt Chamberlain was an athlete who was unstoppable, scored 100 points in a game. So I'm going to argue, and again, we're going off on a tangent here, that Wilt Chamberlain was better than Kareem, but certainly you could look at him as 1 and 2. As far as the argument of Michael Jordan as opposed to LeBron James, I would say that Michael Jordan, they're both great. And Michael Jordan, just by lifting everybody around him, by being competitive, you basically saw a whole season. It's almost like they did a Hard Knocks where you got to see everything and the loyalty he displayed. So even the loyalty to Scott Burrell, the loyalty to Steve Kerr after they had a fight where he punched Stephen Kerr right in the eye. But you know what? It was all about winning. So when he had a chance, he got double teamed, he was able to pass to Steve Kerr, and he would do anything to win. So you saw his competitiveness in everything he did. You saw him gambling with the equipment guys. You saw him flipping quarters into a wall. He did that And when he played golf for money, everything he did was competitive. And everything he did was a competitive fire. And this should be a lesson to everybody, particularly fathers and sons out there. We talk about load management. We talk about just sitting out plays. That Michael Jordan played so many minutes, 44, 45 minutes a game. He didn't take himself out. When he was injured, he literally had a 10% chance of never being able to come back. And he took that chance. And in fact, he stuck it to Jerry Krause. It was episode 2 where he was going to come back even with that foot injury. He basically rehabilitated on his own. He was playing against doctor's advice. And there needs to be more of that. The loyalty to the city of Chicago, the loyalty to Phil Jackson. If they weren't going to bring Phil back, he wasn't coming back for any amount of money. That's the kind of loyalty. The loyalty to Scottie Pippen. When Scottie seemingly, quit on the team on 2 occasions. Actually, you could say 3 occasions. One is when he essentially delayed his surgery so that he would miss half of the season. He did that to spite the Bulls. And guess what? Michael Jordan still supported him. And in the one point where he took himself out of the game, that was another point, which was most teams could not forgive or could forgive, and most teammates would not. But he still forgave him. So he was a guy who was incredibly loyal, even to the guys like Bill Wennington and John Paxson, the bit players. You saw the way Jordan was there in practice, and you could also see a little bit of Jimmy Butler. When Jimmy Butler was in Minnesota and basically got all the third-string players and basically beat the crap out of Wiggins and the other guys, he was taking a page out of Michael Jordan. And also right here in Philly, we remember Kobe Bryant. Just the way Kobe spoke, his voice, his mannerisms. Kobe was the same way, a relentless warrior. Not the easiest guy to play with. He would beat you up. He would torture you. And Michael was his idol. And Kobe learned and learned right from Michael Jordan. And obviously, at the very top, you could argue Kobe, Michael Jordan, LeBron James certainly started off, didn't win the first few years. Jordan took him a while. His team was terrible, but he eventually developed and built a winning culture of 6 separate championships, 2 three-peats, and it was just incredible to watch. And I thought the editing was also great, and the fact that it was unvarnished, that they were able to curse and use the actual words and not filter it out. Now, you actually, for your kids, they actually have a version where all the cursing is edited out, which I think is a service to the young kids. So they did a beautiful job.
Yeah, some great comments here. Jonathan Walker says, at Nebraska, Wilt was just dominant. Even he has relatives from Nebraska. John is a guy that I know in college, would talk basketball with there and talk Husker football with. And Wilt was certainly a special player. I think that when you start to look at Michael Jordan, he certainly motivated the previous generation. I look at Kobe Bryant, and Kobe would admit to learning from Michael how to play in the league and how to be that style. I think Michael Jordan learned his ways from his brother and from his dad. And the coolest thing, I loved how Michael would have his mom on the road with him at all times. It was a complete family affair. His friends were security guards. He didn't feel the need to be liked by the teammates or by the league. He wasn't obsessed with being liked, or he wasn't insecure about how many people like and respect him. He just likes being around his family. He likes having a small inner circle. He's not a guy that's going to put on a television show, or he's not somebody that would probably make a podcast. He probably would not have social media. And in fact, he does not have social media. So I really respect how Michael goes about that, how he keeps his inner circle tight, how he has no insecurities, and he's totally comfortable being himself. In terms of comparisons, I look at Michael Jordan, and I think that Michael Jordan, this is just my personal opinion, when you start comparing people. Like you start comparing Michael to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You compare Michael to Larry Bird. You compare Michael to Magic. You compare Michael to Kobe, to Tim Duncan, to LeBron, to Kawhi Leonard, to Kevin Durant. You're going to pick the player that you like the best. You're going to pick his attitude. You're going to pick his ways, and you're going to cherry pick his stats. You're going to poke holes in their eras. So it's all just a biased assessment because these guys never got to play in each other's eras. So it's always going to be biased. And I like Michael Jordan. And in fact, Bruce, when you saw the Eagles win a Super Bowl, that is not going to be topped, I'm sure, by the second Super Bowl. There's some things in life that just cannot be topped. That game, the greatest upset in football history is the Tyree catch. And I think that that's the greatest football play ever to exist. And if there's a tremendous play that comes down the line from that, it could even be more tremendous to the outside. But everybody's going to have their own personal opinions. Everybody has loyalty to a certain something, whether that's the generation, whether that's growing up with Michael. Everybody has a loyalty, and they're not just going to turn their back on their player. So everybody's already going into the conversation with kind of a preconceived notion when they talk about the greatest. I think everybody loves seeing great basketball. I love the way that Michael Jordan went about just about everything in this doc. I came away loving absolutely everything from him, even when he went up to Larry Bird, even when he spoke to Reggie Miller. A couple of things, of course, for Michael that he's not perfect, like when Charles insulted Michael Jordan. It would be nice maybe if Jordan and Charles could become friends again. I'd love to see those guys become friends, or I'd love to see Michael talk more on a podcast now, because he's never done that at all. I'd love to see Michael on TV. But part of why Michael still hates Charles Barkley, part of why Michael doesn't talk on TV is that's, I guess, what made him so special is the grudge holding, the sensitivity. Sometimes I'm like, why are you so sensitive? Relax, Michael, relax. But there was no relaxing, and that's what made him so cool, or that's what made him such a great accomplishment, I guess, is that real sensitivity that you just can't relate to. But to finish, what I took from Michael Jordan is, even in every aspect of life, is I love how Michael Jordan just thought he was the alpha. And one of my favorite parts, actually, we didn't mention this yet, the sports psychologist spoke in the episode, in episode 10. So many people think of fear of failure. When we're out golfing, me and you were out golfing this weekend, and honestly, me and you talk about this, and on the first tee, I know for myself, you could talk for you, I do think about maybe hitting the ball left, maybe hooking the ball, maybe hitting a slice. I do, those negative thoughts come into my head, especially if just maybe hit a shot out of bounds or something. So negative thoughts just are always in my head. If I'm playing in a pickup game, the first thought is, I'm nervous. Am I going to fit in? And I need to get under control. But fear of failure is the ultimate, I think, hurdle for so many people. And Jordan just never had that. Combine that, you do have to be talented. You can have the perfect Jordan mentality. You can be like him and kind of be a jerk to your teammates. But if you're not talented, none of that's going to matter. So he just had everything lined up for him.
He sure did. And one thing he had that was really portrayed in the first part of the miniseries was the incredible amount of pressure placed upon him by the media and by the fans. He was the Beatles. He couldn't go anywhere, and he couldn't go anywhere without people trying to take his picture, without people asking for autographs. And in the way he carried himself with such style and such cool, the way he dressed, look how he dressed, the sunglasses he wore, the hats, the shirts, and just being like Mike. Like, he really, if we look at Tiger Woods, the way he changed golf, Tiger Woods changed golf forever. He made golf cool. And everybody after Tiger made about 10 times as much money. Michael Jordan, during that era, and, in the Dream Team, and they showed the Dream Team, made it a worldwide thing. It made it national. Across the globe, everybody knew Michael Jordan. And he put the NBA on the map with that particular Dream Team and all of those players. And the guy is just showed so much charisma. Even a lot of times you see where he is. He's in his hotel room. He's hanging out with Gus. Ron Harper was a close friend. Charles Oakley was a close friend. And
Thank you, G-Man.
The fact is that he was a private guy and he respected his privacy. And when he retired for the first time, it was because he was insulted, because they said, and it cut him to the heart, that they said the reason his father, James Jordan, was killed was because he was gambling and he took time to gamble with his father. And somehow his gambling and somehow Stern was going to suspend him quietly. And I think that hurt him so much. That's why he left. He just couldn't take it anymore. And you see how worn out he was, not physically, but emotionally. And that's why he went to baseball, because his dad always wanted him to be a baseball player. And he went to baseball to honor his memories of playing baseball at high school. And he just did it his way. You know, the old song by Frank Sinatra, I Did It My Way. He did it his way from start to finish. And to just see this chronicled. And at first, when I knew there was going to be 10 episodes, I was wondering, how could they fill 10 episodes without putting a lot of filler in? But now I'm hungering for more. I wish there were another 10 episodes to watch. And there's no doubt we're going to rewatch this over and over again.
I want to talk about Michael and his family.
Go ahead.
I just think with social media now and people covering you from a young age in high school and kind of propping you up.
Good night, Karun.
I think it was very healthy that Michael, when he was in high school, didn't have the cameras around and he could kind of grow up on his own around his childhood friends locally. And I believe that Michael Jordan, just by going to North Carolina and by the media just not being all over Michael, I really respected how Michael would have his mom on the road, would have the security guards on the road. And it was a totally different style than Dennis. Dennis was not about the family. He was not with his family. He was hanging out with most of the time with strangers. But that's what made it so fascinating. And Phil Jackson let the guys be the guys. He wasn't over governing whatsoever. He'd let Dennis go wherever he needed to go. So confident. And Phil is really one of the only coaches that Dennis Rodman could have played for and been successful. With the Spurs and the Admiral, Dennis Rodman did not get along even with the Spurs. And it's not to say the Admiral was not a nice guy. In fact, he's one of the nicest guys in all of sports. But Dennis is Dennis. And that's why he needed kind of a rebel like Phil Jackson. But what I take from the doc is that Jordan, he just didn't care what people thought about him. He would completely be himself. And I really appreciated how he went about the game of basketball. But mentioning Tiger Woods, this is my point also. There's very few athletes that when you're in the presence of them, you kind of get that. You kind of get awestruck, or you can't hear a sound. And this year when we went to the Masters to see Tiger, we've seen Tiger a couple of times in person. He has that glare, he has that edge to him, and it doesn't even have to be a Tiger or Jordan, but people just have natural edges. Even when you look at people that are successful, the cool guy at the bar that gets the girl, they always have that natural edge. It might come naturally to Michael and Tiger, just being in that moment, Michael's mannerisms, being the showman that he is. He puts on a show. The fans are looking at him, and he just knows how to act. He pushes all the right buttons. Tiger Woods with the fist pump, the intensity. It's just special. There's very few people that can do it. Sugar Ray Leonard when he goes around the boxing ring, or Roger Federer as well. There's certain athletes that just have that aura, and that's what Michael had, the aura.
So he didn't just have the talent.
Yes.
And again,
so much more.
LeBron has a different style. LeBron certainly has an iron will. But if you look at LeBron, a lot of times he's not smiling. He's very serious and he's very diligent. And we have to say, when we met, I've met both of those people in person. And when I met Michael, he was at a time when he was distracted. He was leaving his wife, and we were in Miami. We had a chance to talk to him, have some drinks with him, and he was quiet. He was reserved, but he was polite enough. But LeBron, when you met LeBron, we'll go back to that just because we're talking about LeBron.
He was very nice.
He was incredible to you. And this is when you're younger. How many years ago? Maybe 9 years ago?
Yeah, I was like a sophomore in high school.
You were a sophomore in high school. We met LeBron James right after he was coming back from his own dream team. He had flown back. He was jet lagged. He was in New York City, and he was in the lobby, no posse at all. And you were there, 15-year-old kid, something like that, 14, 15, in that age group. And you said to LeBron, LeBron, I want to go to the Nike store and buy your shirt, buy your T-shirt, and will you wait for me to sign the T-shirt? And LeBron, and I was like embarrassed that you said that, but you were still a kid. And he said, sure, I'd be happy to wait for you. And he waited in the lobby, made some calls. And after he did that, he went to Sarah Beth's kitchen next door. There must have been 20 co-eds from University of Utah, if you recall. And guess what? He posed for every one of those pictures, signed every one of those autographs. So it shows you, when you're at a level of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, these people, Tiger Woods, and more so than ever, Tiger Woods was thought to be aloof. But right now, the new Tiger Woods appreciates he's been back. He went basically to the dead. He went to the dark side. And he came back. And what we saw when he won the Masters was an ultimate to see somebody come back after they've been down and come back and reach the heights and winning the Masters in that final round. Or Michael Jordan coming back against all odds after 2 years of baseball and coming back and doing another three-peat. And it was only Jerry Krause. It was only Reinsdorf and the whole circumstances. In my mind, that's the only thing that kept that from a seventh win was just the fact that group couldn't be together, because I believe they knew exactly how to win. And like Jordan said, and what they said about him was he had to use more of his mind, more of his intellectual ability. That's what he said in the final episode. In order to win, it wasn't pure talent. And he just learned. He was a great passer, and he was also a great defender. And what Michael Jordan was a motivator of men and continues to motivate men, women, and children. And this, The Last Dance, beautiful title, wonderful footage, edited incredibly. Imagine, this was 22 years ago, and they waited to release it right now in a time when this nation and this world needs a boost.
Yeah.
And for me personally, The Last Dance gave me the boost that I needed.
It sure did. And I'm sad it's over, but I take so many things from Michael. When I'm doing anything, I try to envision just greatness, dominance, and all of the adjectives that Michael represented in this documentary. And just whenever you're feeling down, you just look at Michael and that smile, that grin, and you felt very secure if you were on his team that Michael was going to will the team to win. And it's just that trust and security. And I thought the doc was the director was just spectacular. It hit all the right notes, the timeline. It was not easy putting together, going back really, 15 years to Jordan at North Carolina, and then catching him up with every year, 85, 86, and showing the Bad Boy Pistons, showing the Celtics. And it really became a Michael Jordan documentary. But then you even got the information about Kerr, which I knew about, the tragic death of his father. And they gave a nice tribute to Kerr.
Right. I think one thing we have to mention is Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen at times was quiet. He was the unsung hero. The fact that Pippen was there throughout, he played on an insultingly low contract, but was certainly clearly an incredible player. You watch all the times that Pippen played everything. He rebounded, and the fact that they devoted a whole episode to Scottie Pippen, they talked about it in high school, growing up. They showed him in college where he was actually so small that I think he was literally like the water boy.
Yeah.
And came out of, was it Arkansas State?
Equipment manager
Arkansas
at
State.
Central Arkansas.
Oh, Central Arkansas.
Not even close to the University of Arkansas, or
Arkansas
not even
State.
Central, not even Jonesboro, like you said. This was a Division II school at Central Arkansas. And I'm not even sure the town of Central Arkansas, but Scotty What a journey from Central Arkansas. That was a tremendous episode as well.
And so look about they showed Rodman. There was a whole episode of Rodman.
Yep.
There's a whole episode on Pippen. Tonight, the episode 9 really focused on Steve Kerr, and they also brought in a lot of the bit players. A lot on B.J. Armstrong, very articulate guy.
Phil Jackson.
And they also brought in Phil Jackson intermittently. They also brought in. They didn't shy away from controversy. They brought in Isaiah Thomas and Michael Jordan basically said that he didn't like him, that he was a horse's ass. And he talked about, and just seeing Jordan watching her, sitting in that chair and just being able to go smoking that cigar and going over that. And the director, there was some of the beautiful segments where, and I know I almost finished off and now I'm going back. This is a flashback, just showing him the iPad and the director wanting to see the emotions and see Jordan's eyes light up or get angry, just the way they did that, and they filmed it in real time. The time when Jordan teared up, when he really teared up because he was talking about all the pressure from the media, why he left, and he teared up and he said, "I got a break." That might have been the most emotional portion of the whole.
It's so revolutionary. This documentary with the iPad. I believe that other documentaries are going to copy this method of handing the subjects the iPad like this, because that, you're right, was some of the best footage when he's like, the glove? You talking about the glove?
Gary, the glove?
And then the part with Ahmad Rashad when he's sitting around in that room. Of course, it's him and Ahmad Rashad, his buddy, and they're talking about it's nut crunching time, and then he's like, some guys, like, it's time. Some guys are built for this moment. This is it. This is the big time. This is where it gets tough. You got to lock in right now. And then he's like, some players are meant to rise in these moments, and some are not. And then Jordan said, "Hey, Ahmad, don't tell that to Scotty Burrell. Like, he'll bleep himself, so don't tell Scotty that, because Scotty will get too nervous. He won't be able to handle this type of discussion." So Michael, just so much comedic relief. He had just so many great lines, like to Larry Bird. What was the line too when Michael had that high voice, like, "No problem"? Do you remember that? I'm trying to remember the scene, but Michael was like, "Yeah, we're gonna win this game, no problem."
Yeah, and he had supreme confidence, like you were talking about being nervous. Not only did he have supreme confidence in himself, but he was able to instill confidence in the fact that Phil Jackson was able to meld all these different personalities together. And when Pippen was feeling sorry and sulking, he was there. And Phil Jackson knew how to manage his players. So a great coach, a great manager, knows how to manage and keep people together. And certain people need a kick in the butt. And maybe Burrell is one of those kind of guys. And other people needed to be treated with respect and to be nurtured. And Steve Kerr, obviously a tremendous coach, a tremendous human being, coach of the Golden State Warriors throughout another epic dynasty, is such a likable person.
Couldn't find a better guy than Steve Kerr.
You just don't find a better guy walking the planet than Steve Kerr.
He's such a good guy, such a peaceful guy. He even had back issues a couple of years ago. But the thing about Steve Kerr is that Steve Kerr, he never was insecure about his role. That's the thing about Paxson and Kerr, is that they knew they weren't Michael. Kerr knew it wasn't Scotty. He didn't have the abilities of Dennis in terms of defense. But Steve Kerr said, "I'm a shooter and I'm going to help out and I'm going to accomplish my role." And that's what makes him a tremendous coach. He's a tremendous psychologist. He's one of the friendliest guys in professional sports today. And just hearing about that story of Steve Kerr going to college at Arizona, he's one of the more humble guys. When you're a nice guy, you're very humble. He's very, very humble, and he took notes from Paxson, and he was there when he was called upon. And if you're on a championship team, you need the role players. You look back to the Eagles and the Giants, the Philadelphia Eagles, I would say the role player that year might have been Trey Burton. That would run that Philly special. It might have been that Tyree. It might have been like a Kiwanuka. For the Giants, who had the game-winning interception against Tony Romo, it's R.W. McQuarters. If you talk about great teams that win championships on the on the Warriors, I would talk about Iguodala. Iguodala is more like maybe a Pippen or a
he's
Rodman.
A role player,
but he's an elite
Sixers,
player.
You know what's interesting?
Maybe like a Kevon Looney or Sean Livingston. But go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
The fact is, when you take Iguodala and you tried to make him the superstar of the 76ers,
right?
That just wasn't his role. He wasn't loud. He didn't want to lead men. He basically is a guy who is a second banana or a third banana, and a great one at that. A great defensive player, a great rebounder. So when you put him on a team and you have a coach like Steve Kerr, you have Steph Curry, and you have, obviously Durant came along, and you have all these alpha dogs, and obviously Draymond Green is the alpha dog. So if you look at Michael Jordan, there's you could look at Draymond Green, how he's just a guy. It doesn't have the ability, but Draymond Green is a leader. He's a guy will push you down, will get in fights.
Foxhole guy.
But then you look at Steph Curry, who's just an immaculate shooter, and you look at Jordan, his form. I don't think I've seen anybody elevate when they call Air Jordan. When you see him elevate for a jumper, it's just something you've just never seen. Nobody to have that form, to have that release, and everything is seen in slow motion, and to have the speed, the quickness, the handles, in the drive, all wrapped up in one person who had that competitive spirit, makes him a once-in-a-lifetime player, and makes him, in my opinion, the greatest basketball player of all time.
When you look at the way that the games were officiated back in the day, I really appreciated how Reggie Miller, who came across great in the doc, how Reggie would even be able to push Michael, that they'd even be able to have little scuffles and the refs wouldn't panic. There wouldn't be ejections. Even though the game might have been more violent in certain ways, a little bit, I would call it physical, because it's not like guys are getting absolutely hammered and concussed. It's more like shoving.
They were getting hammered.
But
if you look at the bad boys, look
you're
at
right,
Bill
you're
Laimbeer,
right. Taunting.
Bill Laimbeer. And there was also, Jordan was able to get away with taunting.
Rodman and Karl Malone
Jordan
and just them fighting.
Guys,
yeah.
But I think taunting is great.
It's a part of sport.
And you know what? It was accepted. The physicality, you look at Rick Mahorn and you look at Bill Laimbeer and Isaiah Thomas, that was such a physical. These guys beat each other up. And even when you saw Reggie Miller, and the funniest thing was Dennis Rodman, who was he tangling with when he was
mailman, Karl Malone.
Oh, yeah. But he was basically attacking him. He must have hit him 4 different times and tackled him. They were tackling each other.
He wouldn't let Carl get up because he would be
other
in the way, and they were tumbling and tumbling time after time.
But you look at Rodman, and when you saw him come back from, and you saw him getting those rebounds and how he would high point the ball. And when Rodman was like, the rare times when he wasn't stoned, he wasn't high, wasn't drunk, he would have those lucid moments where should be the best. He was almost like not like Gronkowski. Obviously, doesn't have all those substance problems, but Gronkowski's the same kind of way. He could go out, he could go on a boat, he could do commercials, he could make music videos, but yet when he's on the field, he's serious. So in certain ways, I draw a parallel between a complete free spirit like Gronkowski and a Dennis Rodman. Different guys, but also tremendous charisma, colorful guys that wouldn't have been the Bulls without Rodman, for sure.
Tremendous point there. And the thing is, when you have Michael, you have Steve Kerr, you have all these serious guys. Usually in all the tremendous teams, there's a guy that's a wacko. It's kind of like the opposites attract. Usually when you have a very rigid wife, that the husband's going to go out and be kind of crazy, and the wife will rein in the husband. It could even be vice versa in so many relationships. And Gronk, that's a really good comparison, because you look at Tom Brady, who's totally different than Gronk, family man, kind of like Michael. And then you have Gronkowski. Think about Rodman. Rodman is definitely inspirational if you don't want to be judged by other people. He could wear green hair. Social norms. There is no norm. Nothing is normal about him. Rodman. He wears pajamas everywhere. When they snuck him out of the building, like he was playing, like they snuck him through a secret tunnel and the media was chasing him. That was such a funny scene. So wild.
He's a funny, very likable guy.
Yes.
Because he's so human and he's got so many frailties that you got to love Rodman. And just the way he is.
He's very himself, and if the team loses, Rodman could be blamed, and he isn't perfect. You talk to guys on the Spurs, I'm sure people will say Rodman is selfish. I don't think that he's 100% liked, but that's the thing about Dennis is
Can
that.
I tell my one story about Rodman?
Yeah, sure. You could tell it in a PG version, and then we'll close out the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a guy named Bobby.
Actually, just say it however you want to tell it.
Thanks. I'm going to say it all this. It's so a guy named Bobby, and he's a friend of ours from Florida, actually went to a club with Dennis Rodman, and another mutual friend was with him. I wasn't there, but I was close by, and somehow Rodman was acting like a jerk, and Bobby, for some reason, basically hauled off and hit Rodman right in the face so hard that his watch flew off. And those guys went outside, and we were and I wasn't worried, but my friend was worried that something really bad was going to happen. It turns out that they had an understanding between the two of them. They literally hugged it out, and Rodman and this guy hugged it out, and they hung out all night. And then Rodman gave him like a pair of $400 sunglasses. So it shows you Rodman is probably just so tough. He's not unaccustomed to having people, fight him or take him the wrong way. But yet, in this instance, which was just a 1 degree separation from me, this is a Dennis Rodman story, and I thought I'd share that with people.
Absolutely. Chris the Entertainer just popping in right now. I want to say hi to him, Jeremy Hansman, and Delano Steele with some very kind words about the show. Definitely go check out Entertainer, tremendous YouTuber talking Giants and everything NFL football. Maybe he'll have a reaction to Michael Jordan and this doc. But we've been here, good 47-minute podcast tonight, sports doc here on Rover Sports YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. And I'm definitely going to post this probably tomorrow morning up on our iTunes page. Go ahead and check out the podcast as well. Give that a listen. So, Bruce, this was a pleasure. What an amazing 10 weeks, especially during the quarantine, like you talked about, much needed, bittersweet because it was absolutely fantastic. But now there is no doc. Hopefully we could get some more docs out of this crew and of the Chicago Bulls. But it was a wonderful journey, and I still can't wait to continue to talk about in future episodes.
And just in closing, I want to say anybody who hasn't seen The Last Dance, if you thought you knew everything about Michael Jordan, or you thought it would be just cliche or just basketball clips, this is anything but. This is a human story. This is human drama, and it went deeply into the personalities of many different players, the interplay between the general manager, Jerry Krause, the very negative interplay. Even posthumously, this guy was a complete villain from start to finish, at least as portrayed in this documentary. And I just want to wish everybody, certainly Chris the Entertainer, Karoon Butler, Margaret Shue, all my friends and all the friends along the lines of the YouTube.
Kid Blue.
And just want to thank, obviously, Spence, my partner in crime, my quarantine partner. Just want to wish everybody just a beautiful night, a beautiful Sunday night. And as always, good night and good sports.